What's up, brand builders? Stephen Hurahan here on the Brand Master Podcast. And in this episode, I'm joined by the one and only Michael Janda. Now, Michael is an agency veteran, having built a solid 20-person strong agency with the who's who of clients from Google to Disney to Netflix and many, many more household name brands. He's also a business coach and the best-selling author of Burn Your Portfolio, and just a genuine all-round nice guy. Today, Mike lends us his vast experience on how to increase your prices, get bigger clients, and grow your agency. Now, our chat today was so much fun, and we fit so much in that, honestly, there is so much value in here. So I decided to split it into two parts. So if you want to learn the principles of pricing your work, the core pricing structures, and how to upsell your clients to strategy, then stick around for this episode of the Brand Master Podcast. Welcome to the Brand Master Podcast, a show specialized in helping branding professionals and entrepreneurs to build brands using strategy, psychology, and creative thinking. Okay, welcome everybody to the Brand Master Podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to have the one and only Michael Janda on. Michael, welcome. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Hey, Stephen, thank you for having me on. It is a pleasure to be on your podcast. I always tell people that I get jealous. There are two accents that if I had the two accents, I would be like significantly better looking in the eyes of humanity. And English, British accent is one of them. And Australian accent is the other one. Like you can be a moderately good looking man, but if you open up your mouth and start speaking with an Australian accent, people are like, oh my gosh, he's the most beautiful person I've ever seen. It's true.
I actually grew up in Ireland for 20 years.
I hear the Irish.
And when I was 20, I moved to Australia. So I've been in Australia 20 years. Next year, I'm moving to France.
Oh, you
because
are?
my wife is French. So, and that's a sought after accent as well. But I think when you put the three of them together, I'll just sound weird.
No, I definitely hear the Irish in there for sure. Yeah. But you've got the Australian undertones as well.
Yeah, anyway. Absolutely, man. Yeah. I love your story and where you've come from, because I was listening to a podcast a while ago. I can't remember which podcast it was on, but you were telling about your humble beginnings. You know, and you had that job. You had that job starting off, the one that you kind of you didn't want to take. You took it, you know, because you couldn't get your foot in the door at an agency, but it was you know, designing business cards at a print house. Yeah, and then you know your rise from there. You know, it was astronomical. Can you talk us through, you know, those humble beginnings and, you know, how you were kind of feeling at the start of your career and how you rose so quickly and got to where you got?
Yeah, you know, it was a blow to my self-esteem. I graduated from university and I'm submitting my portfolio into agency after agency, trying to land somewhere and thinking that I would be able to, because, you know, you had my degree. And I was getting no traction. And finally, after it was like 2 months of job hunting, I got my first job offer. And it was at a copy store. I was the pre-press coordinator was my title. And I think that for somebody like me, where I'm driven so much by my own competitive nature, like I don't want to settle for mediocrity in my life. And so when I couldn't get a job of anything of stature, and all I could get was this copy store job, it just fueled me for years to go and try and prove to myself and my competitive nature of proving to everyone else in the world that I was better than that first job that I got. And so I just dug in with self-education. It was the late 90s. I started learning HTML and Flash when it came out, and I'd spent, you know, $2,000 on my first little computer and just on a credit card. We had no money, my wife and I, and she was still finishing school, but I needed the tool to be able to practice. And so I just got after it. I think and then within, let's see, 4 years later, I was a creative director at Fox Studios, living in Los Angeles, managing a team of 50 people. And it came I think more out of not as so much my ability to design, but my ability to lead people, to speak confidently, to lead a room, to organize a team, to complete a task, all of those kinds of things, to mentor and shape other designers to provide what we needed. That's where I think a lot of my success came from. Not so much that Mike Janda was the greatest designer in all the world. I sometimes think I'm like one of the most successful, mediocre designers that ever lived, because I get it and I'm good enough, but I'm not like some of the design superstars that are out there.
Yeah, and I feel the exact same way in terms of, you know, my capabilities and what I bring to the table. I know that a lot of it is about my people skills, and being able to speak with my clients and to make them feel looked after and taken care of, and to kind of give that sense of confidence that I know what you need. I'm going to help to give you that, rather than I'm the best designer and wait till you see what I'm going to design for you. So I can definitely resonate with that. And, you know, the people skills side of things, really, to me, I don't think we speak a lot about it. And I know that you've written Burn Your Portfolio, which is all about the stuff that you don't learn in design school, and you know, the psychology of graphic design. But really, I think the conversation that we need to have more of is the importance of people skills and being able to manage people. You know, to hold their hand and bring them from A to B, especially as we're going into this more of a freelance world, people stepping back from agencies and building their own businesses. What do you think about that? What do you think about the need for those people skills, and for people to take the time, as much as upskilling their design skills, to work on their people skills?
Yeah. If you want to progress in your career as a designer, if you're only good at design, but you're not able to manage a team or to manage clients or to do that client interaction, those people skills, you're going to cap out your earning power. Because at some point, if you're internal with an agency, at some point, they're going to say, whoa, Steven, man, you're an amazing designer. I want to promote you to be an art director and lead a team of other designers to do work as good as you do. And if you're not able to do that leadership side and have the people skills to lead that, you're going to cap out. You're going to fail as an art director, and you'll be a great designer and you maybe can earn a great living, but you'll cap out on the org chart because you don't have those people skills. And then as a creative director, where you're sitting, you know, in creative director role, you spend 50-80% of your time in meetings with clients, internal meetings, and you're just in meetings, and you have to do so much person to person interaction and so much selling yourself and your ability to execute on what the client needs and understanding the client's needs. If you don't have the ability to do that, you're going to fail as a creative director. You're not a creative director because you can design the best. You're a creative director because you're a good designer, but you can sell and convey trust and understand the client's needs and understand how to solve those needs. But you're not there because you're the best at pushing the pixels around. So those people skills are so critical for designers to be able to progress in their career.
What I hear you speak about a lot, and because you have the chops, you have the experience, you've been there and done that, is in and around the principles of pricing your work and working with clients and doing it in a way that's systemic, and it's not, pulling numbers out of thin air. Talk to me about your main principles of pricing your work.
Yeah. So I kind of reverse engineered how I started thinking about it when I started trying to write a book about how do I price this stuff. And I had priced, my agency my agency run, we did over $30 million in revenue. So that's a ton of pricing engagements. And then to do it at a sizable profit margin, you got to really understand what you're doing to be able to do it. And so I had a chapter in Burn Your Portfolio that I wrote back in 2012 and 13 that was called the Fixed Bid Pricing Dartboard. And it came out of the idea that, yes, we do throw a dart at the board and then we choose a price based on where that dart hits. But if we dissect the board into 3 strategies that we're going to understand, then we have a lot better chance of hitting a number that's actually going to work for us. So it's not just any number from 0 to 1 million. It's actually a set of numbers that are strategically calculated. And then we throw the dart and decide where we want to have that be. So I started to think, okay, how do I dissect that idea? Because I was just doing it all in my head when I would sit with client. How do I dissect that idea and turn it into something tangible? And I did that when I started writing The Psychology of Graphic Design Pricing, which I originally started as a blog post. And then it got so big that I was like, well, this isn't a blog post. It ended up being a 200-page book, because to be able to articulate what I was doing in my head into something tangible that other people could implement took a lot more than a page. So anyway, to answer your question, 3 variables that we look at. Variable number 1, production cost. How much does it cost us to produce the work? So you've got to understand how many hours you're going to put into it and what your cost is per hour. How much do you need to earn per hour to keep the lights on in your business and in your life? So you understand that. That's variable number 1. Then we take into consideration variable number 2, which is market value. What do other people like me charge for this same thing? Now, the like me is really important because people like me are other people in my phase, other agency owners and stuff. When my agency had 20 employees, I would look around and say, okay, well, other agencies like us are charging $200,000 for this thing. But a freelancer working out of their house, living in a middle tier market or country, is charging 20 grand for the same thing. But at my agency, I couldn't compete with the 20 grand. And that freelancer can't charge 200 grand because they're not bidding on it from an agency standpoint. So market value is dependent upon people like you. What are other people like you charging? So that's variable number 2 that we have. And then we take into consideration one more variable, and that is the client's budget. What does this client even want to spend to solve the problem that they're coming to me with? They need a new website. We've determined that, yep, that's the thing that they actually need. Now, how much do they have allocated to that? And we take those 3 variables, production cost, market value, and client budget, and then we decide where are we going to price this project, somewhere in the vicinity of the ranges of those 3 variables. And when we're busy with tons of work, we're going to bid things on the high end because our hourly time is at a premium. And when we have no work, we're going to bid things on the low end to increase our chances of landing the project. So there are a lot of different things that we take into consideration when we're pricing work for our clients. But the foundation are those 3 variables.
And I love that. I love structures. I love frameworks. I love systems, because if you don't have that, then you are throwing a dartboard. You're pulling it out of thin air. And if you're doing that every time, then you're not building a business. Businesses are all about systems. Now, there is no right or wrong way to do this, but you definitely need a system. And 3 of the most common pricing structures that we see time and again are hourly, fixed cost, and then value based as well. I'm sure you've read the book Win Without Pitching Manifesto by Blair Enns, and there's a lot of talk in the future about value based pricing. Talk to me about your philosophy on pricing structures and what you think of value based pricing versus hourly or fixed cost.
Okay, well, hourly for me is the is the worst way to price your work.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is that, and there are a couple of times that we do it, which I'll share in a second, but the thing that bites about hourly pricing is that it penalizes you for being really good at what you do. You've been doing this a long time. You're fast. You're talented. You can get to the solution super fast, and you know all your keystrokes and production secrets to speed up your work. And you invested in the fastest machine you can get, and now you charge less as a result of it. You go, I mean, you have a lot of logo designers and brand designers that follow your content based on your titling. You can design a logo, man, in an hour. And if you're super good, you can get to the right solution in a short amount of time. And now you can only charge the client a small amount of money because you are so good at what you do. So hourly just sucks for that reason. Now, when we charge by the hour, if we genuinely cannot scope this project, then maybe you go into it hourly, because you want to protect your downside on that. So there are circumstances when you can charge hourly and it's the right pricing structure. You're fixing a bug on a website. At my agency, we never fixed bugs in any engagement that wasn't hourly, because fixing the bug could take 1 hour or it could take 100 hours. So we just don't know until we start pulling the thread. So there are circumstances when hourly makes sense, but in most cases, hourly is not the right way to go. All right. You want me to go on to fixed bid and thoughts on that?
Yes. And then your thoughts on value-based and whether or not
I have a lot on both of those.
Good. Let's go.
All right. So fixed bid pricing, for most circumstances, this is the most profitable way that you can do work, because you can factor in the value that you're producing for the client. You can factor in the market value, what other people are charging for that same thing. It rewards you for working quickly. The faster you work, the more money you make. The faster you get to the solution, the more money you make based on an hourly, based on your time. So it is a great way to price your work. And you can have a much higher profit margin based on a fixed price or fixed bid engagement. It only works successfully if you have a super detailed scope. Man, I hammer on this to my community and my content. You got to detail out every single thing. And then you got to have a clause in there that says anything not detailed in here is considered out of scope, because you'll be battling the scope with clients sometimes as they try to add new little things here and there. And that's where you can die in a fixed bid engagement. If you say yes to the little add-ons, now you can't charge for them. Now you're making less money. So that's one of the potential downsides to fixed bid pricing. But 90% of the revenue that I made over my agency run was fixed bid pricing. I think it's the way to go for most engagements. All right, now value-based pricing, and I have a lot of
talk to me. I see that smile on the side of your face. Talk to me about value-based pricing.
Value-based pricing, I conceptually I love it. You should be charging based on the value that you create for your clients. The downside to value-based pricing is that I believe that there are a lot of designers out there trying to value-based price their projects with clients that have no business trying to do value-based pricing. They have no business doing value-based pricing because they're pitching value-based pricing to a client who barely understands their own business. You say to a client, and let's just agree that the idea behind value-based pricing is you sit with the client, and this is the way that I've seen it be taught, which I think is ineffective. You sit with the client and you say, well, how much money do you think you'll make on this work that we do over the next year? You get the client to say a number to you. Oh, well, if everything goes right, we'll make $100,000. And then you say to the client, okay, we'll charge you 10% of that. We'll charge you $10,000 for this thing that we're going to create for you. That's just a percentage of what you're going to make on it. So it's a good investment for you. That's the idea behind value-based pricing, as I've seen it taught from on a variety of different YouTube videos and things like that. The problem is that when you say that to a client, you say, how much do you think you're going to make on this over the next year? Most of your clients, because it's true that most business owners don't have a good handle on what their business projections even are, most of them have no clue how to even come up with that number or just speculate a number. They just don't understand their business. So if you want a value-based price, you've got to have, number one, a very seasoned and smart entrepreneur who you're working with, who looks at their business and projects ROI on not just the engagement with you, but everything else. The other thing that you need to have is a project that's the right type of project. You can't value-based price a business card design or a brochure or a menu design for a restaurant or a sign for a store. How do you value-based price that thing? You say to them, how much do you think you're going to make because we redesigned this storefront for you? How much increased revenue do you think you're going to make off of that? Well, it's impossible to quantify that, to look at it and say, oh, even if you tried to track it after the fact, it's still hard because there's so many variables that go into the success of the thing that you create. And then the one that I think really is problematic with value-based pricing is this thing in the sales world called the cost of the best alternative. The cost of the best alternative. And in sales, that idea is that, okay, Stephen gives me a price of $10,000, which, yes, is 10% of what I think I'm going to make on $100,000 on this thing that they create for me over the next year. And Stephen gives me a price of $10,000 for it. Well, the natural next step for someone is to say, okay, well, what is the cost of the best alternative? Who is another designer that can do this work at similar quality to Stephen, and how much do they charge for that same type of work? And there are a lot of designers out there who, if you say that you want to design a $10,000 logo for a client, there are a lot of designers who would say, well, I'll do it for $8. I'll do it for $7. I'll do it for $4. I'll do it for $50. So you keep going down, looking at the cost of the best alternative, deciding if Stephen is the best choice and I'm willing to spend the extra money to have him. But in order to value-based price, a client really has to be sold on you doing the work, not just the work being done, but that individual doing that exact work. So that's my little bit of rant on that. I do want to share a way that I like to say, okay, let's do it this way for that. But do you have any comments on?
Yeah, our philosophies align completely. Because look, in theory, in practice runs, in mock calls, it can go that way. But really, when you're on the phone with a client and you ask them, what do you hope to make from this? A lot of the times they don't know. They simply don't know. And even if they do know, or even if they have an idea, a lot of the time it'll be, you'll get a lot of pushback, and they'll say to you, well, what do you think I'm going to make from this project? Yeah. You're the professional. You tell me how much I'm going to make.
Yeah.
So I really feel that now I think there are circumstances where it really does work. And if you are providing for example, marketing strategy and digital marketing execution services that where you can bring some metrics to the table at the end of the day, then, there is a leg in for that. But when we're talking about branding, it's very soft. It's very soft to quantify results from branding. So that's why I don't personally use it. And I don't, I don't promote value-based pricing. I promote fixed pricing based on your production value, the margin that you want to earn, and then of course, understanding the market and who you're playing against. So very, very much aligned with what you do. So I think we're on the same page there.
Yeah, good. You mentioned one of them. I mean, there are a few different things. Actually, you mentioned two. There are a few different scenarios when you can value-based price, and one is campaign creation. Mm-hmm. You create a campaign and then you manage that campaign and then you see the results and then you're paid based on, then you can see the performance. And then a marketing strategy in general. We're going to overhaul your entire marketing strategy so that you generate X better revenue next year. And then we're looking at the whole business as a whole. But outside of that, man, I don't see how you could value-based price a logo, a brochure, even a billboard, a menu design, like I mentioned, a website, maybe an e-commerce website. You could value-based price an e-commerce website, but then you're beholden to results. And if you are not managing the entire thing, then you cannot control the results. And this is where you can get in trouble with value-based pricing. I'm going to value-based price something, and then my client has to manage their business in a way that it actually generates the value that we all anticipated it would generate. But if the client doesn't manage their business effectively, then the campaign itself will fail, and then I will look like a failure because I value-based priced them.
Yeah, there are a lot of angles to it. Yeah. And as you said, me personally, fixed base, when you know your production costs, and as you said, this is very much dependent on a detailed scope. The margin that you want to earn as a business, and not just talking about, I can do this, as a freelancer at cost. You have to think as a business, and that's my philosophy on it, and that's how I like to operate when it comes to strategy. So go ahead.
Well, I have another thing on value-based pricing on how to do it when it works. Mm-hmm. And if you are dead set on value-based pricing because you saw somebody teach that and you're like, oh, that's what I want, then my opinion is put your money where your mouth is and go into a strategic partnership of some sort with your client where you get paid off the actual performance of the work you did, mm-hmm. not the projected possible performance, but the actual. And I know of an agency here in where I live that did this. They got deals with AT&T and this huge mattress company and stuff, this global mattress sales store. And the way that they did their value-based pricing is they took it all over. They got paid on a per unit price for everything that they sold, but they were creating all the marketing on their own dime. They were creating landing pages, email marketing, ad marketing, and all of the sales funneled through the agency. This agency had a whole big call center, and they were selling the stuff. And then the agency would report back to the client saying, hey, here's how many we sold. Now we owe you this money because the agency collected all of the money. And then the agency paid the client off who actually had the products. So all the money was funneling through the agency. And this is how value-based pricing can work if you really want to do it. But man, unless this agency had 150, 170 employees and a few floors of a nice Class A office space, and they were killing it on a revenue standpoint. But for most designers out there, if you went to a designer and said, hey, I don't want to pay you anything, Stephen, I want you to do this work for me. I'm not going to pay you anything up front. You're just going to do the work. And then as we get sales, you're going to get paid off the sales. That way we're all in the same boat together. Man, 99% of the designers in the world would say, well, I can't afford to do that. I don't have enough money to go and front all the cost of all this work. I can't financially do it. And they will back out of a deal like that. But that's a partnership. And if you want to do value-based pricing, I say do it that way. Get paid off actual results, not the...
Yeah, and I think sometimes we need a little bit of a seasoning of reality to step into the shoes of who are asking to do what and whether or not we would be prepared to take on the same offer. And, a lot of the times I don't think that would be the case, as you just said. Yeah. Now, a lot of the work that you've come from this creative agency background, and the work that you would have done would have been predominantly creative work, design work. Yeah. How, of course, there would have been strategy work in there as well. How much of the work that you did was strategy, and did you find yourself upselling to clients, upselling strategy to clients just by asking deeper questions? How did that work for you?
Yeah. So early years, hardly any strategy. Later years, tons of strategy. And that's just the nature of growing up in your business. In the early years, you're doing a bunch of logo design because that's what you're qualified to do. But then you start designing it so well that your name starts to be circulated around as somebody who can make an impact on someone's business. And then the client wants you to do all the stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, do more. They just keep asking for more. And so that the natural progression is into strategy work for any creative. Like we were talking about, people skills is a natural thing that you're going to have to understand if you want to maximize your career. Well, strategy services is another natural thing on the hierarchy of your career that you're going to have to start to understand, because your clients are going to want you to do more and more of it the more seasoned you get. Anyway, so how do you upsell a client on strategy? It really isn't that complicated, the upsell. The upsell for me comes from just asking a few questions and letting the client realize that they don't know their own business. So, question number one, well, tell me about your target customer. Do you have a persona, defined understanding of who your target customer is and where we can find them? And then, if you're working with smaller businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs will be like, no, I don't know. We kind of, we have a lot of different clients. They just give you some loose answer. Okay. And then you say, okay, all right, I understand you don't have that pinned down. That's something we can help you with. Now, what about your competitors? Let's look at, do you have a market positioning map or something that outlines your competitors' strengths and weaknesses versus your strengths and weaknesses, and how you're positioned to be better than those competitors? Can you show me something like that so we can understand your market position? And then the client will be like, oh, we kind of have these three competitors. And I mean, this is like most clients. I've worked with tons of clients, and they'll give you some loose answer. And you'll sit there wondering, when you start asking questions like this, how are these people even in business? How are they billing $7 million a year? So, and then I think the last one is targeting like a unique value proposition of just saying, hey, why should someone buy your product? Out of all the choices out there, why should they buy from you? Can you talk to me a little bit about that? And when your client comes back and they don't really understand their target audience, when they don't really understand the competitive landscape, and they don't really understand their unique value proposition, then you're in prime position to upsell them strategy services. So if they don't have clear understanding of those things, then you just say, hey, before we go and dig into this identity rebrand that you want us to do, we really need to understand these things, and you really need to understand these things for your business too. So the first phase of this engagement is going to be strategy work. We're going to sit with you and we're going to define all of those things that we just talked about so that you have a clear understanding of who your business is and who it's targeting and what you offer. And then the client will say, okay, I'm ready. And they'll say, I'm ready because you just created pain in them by highlighting stuff that they're embarrassed that they don't understand.
Absolutely. So that's spot on. And that's exactly the evolution that I went through with the conversations that I began having with my clients. I really just started to ask deeper questions. And the more questions I asked, the more I could hear the hamster wheel on the other side of the line thinking, well, I don't know this stuff. And you know, they feel like they're in the spotlight and they have to come up with the right answers because it's their business. And I think really just to summarize that, it's about highlighting to your client that there's a lot more that they need to understand about their business in order to build a brand that's going to be successful. And if you do that well by asking the right questions, you don't need to sell them anything. We really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you want to learn more brand strategy techniques to level up your skills, make sure you check out brandmasteracademy.com. There's plenty of free resources and premium content for you to download and get you going. If you'd like to join our Facebook group full of like-minded brand strategists, all learning from each other, then find us by searching for the Brand Strategy Community, where you can find exclusive content for members as well. If you enjoyed this content, please be sure to give us an honest review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listened, and make sure you tune in for the next episode of the Brandmaster Podcast.